Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining our call today. We have a lot of good questions that came ahead of time. So I'm Elaine Mikesell, and I do the marketing and communications for Anderson and Boback. So today we are joined by the three partners of the firm, Kim Anderson, Jen
Hello.
Boback, and Jessica Marshall.
Wave, Jessica.
So we have a lot to cover, so let's get right into it. We're going to cover topics related to parenting order and the stay-at-home order, related to financial and support matters, and how to handle travel within this period of time with children. To start with, the first question is going to go to Kim. So Kim, this question has to do with parenting time. So what to do about parenting time if there's a presumed exposure to the coronavirus? Should you quarantine and avoid transfer to the other parent's home?
Right. We all like to tell people that they have to follow the court order. And if the court order says, the other parent has parenting time at a certain day and time, then technically you should follow that because it's a court order. But if you know that there's some sort of exposure or the other person hasn't been quarantined, if there's been travel, et cetera, stuff like that, a lot of people are electing not to send the child. And I think that's fairly good advice, even though it's against the court order. You as the parent have to do what's good for your child and to make sure that your child is safe. So if you have to get on the phone and see if you can work out some parenting time later for the other parent, that's not a bad idea. But right now, I don't think anyone's going to hold you responsible for, protecting your child, essentially.
Sounds good. So it really sounds like follow some common sense. It is time to really talk with each other and take the best interest of the child in the situation. Sounds good. Thank you, Kim. Okay, next question is for Jen. What to do when parenting agreement and MSA are not being followed while the courts are in modified schedules?
Yeah, the courts are certainly still in session, but the courts are under certain orders because of the stay-at-home. We're all doing things via conference call and phone call. So if your marital settlement agreement is not being followed, the first thing that you should do is you should talk to the other parent. You got to talk to the other parent about what your expectations are and how you can keep your children safe. So best case scenario, you work out a new solution. Things may have to be modified. You may have to do things a little bit differently, but talk to the other parent. And if you can't talk with the other parent and come to a resolution and you believe it is an emergent situation, you can still file an emergency motion with the court. The courts are looking at emergency motions and they're determining whether or not they're an emergency. And if they are an emergency, they'll provide an appropriate order. And if it's not an emergency, they're sending you potentially to a free mediation session, which would be taking place online. It's a maximum of 2 hours, but the hope is that it would keep the situation that you feel is an emergency from getting more explosive. So there's certainly things in place. If you believe that your MSA is not being followed, please contact your lawyer after you've talked to the other side, to your former spouse or to the other parent, and we can help you work through that.
Okay, sounds good. Even the courts are getting creative during this period. So that's good to see their options.
They've done a great job getting some great things in place to keep things moving. Yes.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you, Jen. Next question is for Jessica. Jessica, with the stay-at-home order to avoid an exchange, does a parent have the right to deny the other parent's time if the kids are with them now?
Well, we've actually seen some very specific guidance about this from the Cook County courts pursuant to general orders that have been released, and makes it very clear that the parenting time schedule is to go on as per usual. You're supposed to follow that schedule. Now, it goes into the intent of the parent. If you're going to deny the parenting time, why are you doing this? Is there an underlying condition? Is there a health concern? Is somebody high risk? You really have to examine the reason why you want to deny the parenting time. Somebody who typically denies the parenting time because it's Wednesday, you're going to get nailed for this later. But if there is a really good safety reason, as everyone has said, the message is try to work it out. Try to talk to the other parent about it. Try to figure out some makeup time for later. Try to come to an agreement, because if you don't, and you file an emergency motion or they file an emergency motion, there's a good chance that the court's going to tell you go to mediation and try to work it out. Everyone has to try and do what's best for the health of their kids. The court orders should be followed unless there's an extenuating circumstance of some sort, such as a suspected exposure or something like that. But it really depends on your situation, and the court orders are supposed to generally be followed right now.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you, Jessica. Good job. So we're going to switch gears here from parenting time in orders to financial matters and support. So we all have heard about the CARES Act and also about the stimulus package and the impact of that on parents and finances. So Jan, this question is for you. There are a lot of questions related to this. So if you want to take it, starting with the first. How is it determined that who gets what? And also maybe a definition of what the CARES Act is would be helpful.
Yeah, the CARES Act, it's an acronym for Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. It was enacted March 27th of this year, of course, and it's a package to help people through this very difficult time, which is an economic struggle for so many people. Now, it has a lot of provisions in it, and some of the provisions we're going to be talking about today are twofold. First of all, there is the 10% premature 10% withdrawal penalty if you're taking money out of your retirement account before age 59 and a half is waived for any money taken out in 2020. So that allows people to tap into their retirement accounts if they need those finances without any penalty. Of course, taxes apply, but there is no penalty. And the second is the stimulus check that we've all heard so much about. There's certain provisions of who's going to get the stimulus check, and those provisions are based on your adjusted gross income. So you want to look at your adjusted gross income. I believe it's line 8B of your tax return for what you filed in 2018. And if you haven't filed, or if you've already filed in 2019, it would be 2019. It's your most recently filed tax return.
Okay, great, thank you. So, so what if I have not filed in 2000? What if my 2018 were not as favorable as my 2019? Should I hurry and do my 2019?
Well, what you need to do is I would suggest you go online. There are several stimulus calculators available, and you put your information into a stimulus calculator to determine how much your stimulus check will be. For example, if your adjusted gross income is up to $75,000, and you're single, you're entitled to the full $1,200 check. If you're married filing jointly, then $150,000 is your adjusted gross income cap. Now, you go into the calculator and you determine what your stimulus check will be based on your 2018 tax filing. And then you could also put in the information for your 2019 tax filing if you haven't filed yet. And if your check would be higher in 2019, then yeah, I would suggest you get those taxes on file right away. Now, what's not clear is if you take your 2018 based on your 2018 return, because it would be lower in 2019, if there's going to be a clawback. I'm not sure, that's not clear right now. But you want to make sure to maximize this benefit, because not only is it the $1,200 or $2,400 for a couple, but any child under the age of 16, there's a $500 payment that you would receive. So somebody with 1 or 2 or 3 children, it's going to make a significant difference and be a big help. There is a phase out. There is a phase out. If your income is higher than $99,000 adjusted gross income for a single person, or for joint filers, I believe it's $198,000. So there is an income level. There is a cap where you're not going to receive a stimulus check. But for those who make under the eligible amount, those checks will be coming out in the next few weeks. And those checks are either going to be automatically deposited or sent via check, going to be based upon how you have your tax refund sent to you and those tax years that's going to be relevant.
Okay, so it sounds like I don't have to do anything, or the person doesn't have to do anything. They'll
You
just
don't
get
have
that
to
check.
do anything. Yeah, you don't have to do anything. It's going to be an automatic. It's going to be automatic. What you're going to receive is you're going to either see the deposit in your bank account, get your check in the mailbox, but what everybody will get is a letter. And the letter is going to say, this is what happened to your check, and this is how much your check was. So in the event you don't see your bank account or in your mailbox, you could certainly follow up.
Okay, sounds great. Cool. So how about if I didn't have income last year, or I'm not going to be able to make income this year? Is there
If you
anything?
don't have income, you're still eligible. Even those people who receive non-taxable income, like Social Security, disability, they are also eligible. So yes, if you have no income, you're eligible. And yes, if it's non-taxable, you're eligible. The ineligible people are those with the adjusted gross income over and above the threshold mark.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so the next question is for Kim. It's related to the right of first refusal. So in this scenario, the right of first refusal was not followed, and the other parent sent the child to be with someone else in another state and told me, that the impacted parent, that I would need to pay all the expenses to visit the child. What are my options in a scenario like that?
Yeah, well, when there's no compliance with the court order, even in, your normal everyday life without the coronavirus, there's a petition you can file to hold the other person in contempt for that. And that's what you would have to file. So it's good to know that not everything in the courthouse has to be a motion that's an emergency motion. You could just file regular motions, which would be a petition for rule, just as if the coronavirus weren't here. If somebody weren't following the court order, that's what you would file. The courts are giving us briefing schedules and allowing hearings. I had one this week in Lake County, as Keith down there is aware. Keith is waving. And we all get on the phone now. Nobody's showing up in court. So each side has presented their brief, their reply, and the court listens to our arguments on the phone and then issues a ruling. So, the court hasn't come to a grinding, stop just because of the coronavirus. It's just, we're not going into court. So if something isn't being complied with, there's a petition, just like normal. It's called a petition for rule to hold somebody in contempt.
Okay, so that's good to know. Like you may have some situations like that where you don't want to just let them go. So that's good that there's some support during this period. Excellent. All right, so next question is for Jan, please. So what do you recommend for a parent who has a pre-existing health condition, let's say diabetes or heart condition or asthma, etc., and wants to modify the schedule to minimize number of exposures and minimize the risk factor? The main concern here is really safety of everyone involved.
Yeah, and again, I'm going to go right back to our initial recommendation, which is you got to talk to the other parent. And these are some of the things that have come up, because transporting kids back and forth, although that's part of your marital settlement agreement and court orders, of course, need to be followed. If there's something like this where one of the parents to be exposed is life-threatening, then you've got to talk about this and you've got to make some concessions. Whether the children stay at one parent's house, whether the children stay at the other parent's house, whether there's less transferring, or even if the parents have some agreement amongst themselves that if they are transferring, that they're going to be keeping themselves away from other people. They've got to put measures in place. So if you have to minimize your risk, and everybody needs to minimize their risk, but especially if you have an underlying condition, you've got to talk with that other parent. And if you can't come to an agreement and there is something that's seriously endangering, then you've got to turn to the court system, which are there to, number one, either help you with if it's an emergent situation or get you into a mediator who can help you resolve that. And these are a lot of the same issues that we've heard over the last couple of weeks, and these are getting resolved.
Okay, good. That's thank you for that. Really seems like I keep hearing like that, being transparent, communicating, and just kind of doing the best for everyone involved, and going back to that common sense. Okay, so we have a couple of questions in the chat. we'll take these and then we'll move to the rest of the questions on what we have before. Okay, so this question is for Jessica. With everyone losing their jobs and businesses closing, and for what appears to be months, what impact would this have on child support?
Sure. So it's really circumstantial. If there is an unknown amount reduction in your income, it may be prudent to file a motion to modify your child support, and you don't have to wait, nor should you, if you think you're going to take a huge hit to your income. And the reason being is because from the date that you file, that's the date that you can request your relief. So it wouldn't be retroactive back to when your business closes or when your job is lost or when your income stops. It's retroactive back to your filing date. Now, if it turns out after a month or two that you are able to go back to business as usual, you could always dismiss your petition, but filing it at least would make sure that you get that retroactive relief request in. But if it's a situation where you're closed for 2 weeks and your income goes down, that might not be substantial enough to modify. So it's really dependent upon your personal situation, if you have the money to pay your support, if there's a substantial change in your financial circumstances. But you do not have to wait until this is all over, nor should you, to file something if you need that relief.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I was going to bring to everyone's attention that, if you asked a question and if it was answered satisfactory or not, you have the option to share emotions like thank you or hands up or something like that, so we know you're good. Or you could just say thank you in the chat so that we'll know we addressed your question.
Or you could say you didn't answer my question.
Exactly. You can unmute yourself. Good. Thank you. Okay, so there's another question in the chat. I think it's important, so we're going to go over that first. Okay, so this is for Kim. My business has been forced to close based on governor's order for several weeks now, just like many others. With zero revenue coming in, what is your direction? And what is the direction? Is there any direction from the courts in this particular situation?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just what Jessica just said. You have to file a petition to modify your support. If your income changes, then there's your substantial change in circumstance, and you have to have it reset. So, okay. I mean, if there's some sort of discovery done with the motion that shows you have the same income coming in as you did before, then obviously it would be denied. But anyone who's got a substantial change in circumstances that's modifying their income, should file a petition, because it does go back to the date of filing. You wouldn't want to wait on that.
And the other thing to keep in mind here too is the stimulus package is going to provide for a check plus a $500 for each child under 16. So you're going to have some influx of money. So depending on your adjusted gross income, and if your business is closing and your child support is in danger at this point, keep in mind you got that stimulus check coming, and that's the purpose. It's to keep you going as much as possible.
Okay, sounds good. So we're going to go through some of these questions, and we'll come back to some others in the. Actually, no. Let me follow this one. This is a related question, so we'll do this one. Are you aware of the stimulus funds loans that come in will be considered income and accountable in child support?
Of course it is. Sure.
So yeah. So that
it is income for child support purposes, but keep in mind, child support doesn't get modified automatically. If you believe that your spouse received a stimulus check of $4,000 or $5,000 and you want to file a motion to modify your child support to get a piece of it, I guess you could. But when you do your tax returns at the end of the year, I mean, that's your income for sure.
And you have to take into consideration too that the source isn't necessarily what matters. So like Jan and Kim had said, if your stimulus check is replacing income, you still have the ability to pay your support based on the current order. When that runs out, if you don't have the same income coming in, at that point, then it would be a motion to modify. So it just depends.
Okay. All right. So I think there was another question related to loans. So I think that would be the same way. Like if you get a loan, does that impact your situation?
Well, it's my understanding, yeah, that the loans that you get, that the PPP, or the protection for your paycheck loans that you receive, that would be business income, and you would also be using it for business expenses. It's also my understanding that even if it's forgiven, you don't have to take it as income for purposes of your income taxes. So there are some really good protections there for as far as the PPP loans or the stimulus check.
Okay, sounds good. It sounds like this is a really good thing, the stimulus. It's like a silver lining almost in what's happening. I don't know.
It's gonna be a blessing for a lot of people during this time.
Yeah, good. All right, so next question is for Kim, and this is a multi-state scenario. So how should visitations be handled if the non-residential parent's state has not issued a stay-at-home order? So
And
going back and forth and all that.
I don't necessarily think that makes much difference. The question I think that really comes to play is, how is that other parent traveling to the state to see the child? Are they jumping on an airplane? We've had a case like that this week where, the court's looking at, what kind of exposure has this parent had? They're clearly not in quarantine anymore and they're traveling. So, do we have an issue when somebody's jumping on the plane? I think so. I also think that if they're driving, it's kind of an issue, because you actually, in my opinion, would have more stops. You're stopping for gas, you're stopping to go eat. So there's all these possible exposure points when you're traveling to see the child. It would be my recommendation. I think just stay put, not travel right now. Don't go to the other state. Don't have the other state come to you. Everyone should really be standing still at this point. Don't you think so, Jan?
Yeah, I think so. I think this is a very, very serious virus. And I know sometimes we think this can't happen to me. This is an unprecedented issue, and we got to keep our kids safe. We got to keep ourselves safe. So hopefully these parents can work together. And although you may miss some time with your kids have to be kept safe.
Yeah, there's that new app that everyone's sending around now for kids, Messenger Kids, it's called, and it's a Facebook related app. So if you don't have Facebook, just, throw up some profile right away. But it allows, instead of you having to call the other parent on your phone, even, like for 5-year-olds, who's got a phone for a 5-year-old, at least I'm not aware of many that do. But they have like an iPad or some sort of a device, a tablet. You can put that app on, and the child can actually reach out to the other parent as much as they want to. They can play games on it. They can communicate and interact with the other parent that way. And so I'm recommending, when I talk to the parents that I know, to put the app on, and it allows the child to have access whenever they want, and it allows the other parent to have access to the child. And you, as the person who sets it up, get to indicate who has access to your child, of course. Not some random stranger can start communicating. And you can read everything that is written there. So if you're the person using that app, keep that in mind. When you're talking to them, that's one thing, but if you're writing back and forth, that can be read by the person who sets up the app.
You can also, just another note on that app, because I have personal experience with it this week, there is a way to set up like a sleep time so that no calls can be received and none can be sent if your child is like mine and will steal the iPad early in the morning and start trying to FaceTime grandma at 5 a.m.
That's what your child is doing, right?
That's 2 a.m. I tried to call my mother. So she called me and was like, "Where are you?" Anyway, I digress.
Yes.
That's good. This is so, I know this whole thing is like a tragedy, but it's also a time like to just, you see so many innovative ways to relate and be together. And
it's a good time. And it's a good time to show your kids how, your parents are a united front here and are just looking out for your best interest, because they're concerned too, and they feel it and they see it.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like, maybe we'll just divert on this one for a minute, because it's, because everyone's scooped up, parents, kids, etc. And these are times when like maladaptive behaviors could actually come up. So really this whole thing of focusing on the best things for the children during this time is just so important.
Yeah, and there's a question here from Laura. She's asking that if a parent will not stay put and is driving back and forth to a different state, do you think that would be an emergency? Kim has had this issue come up and has been in front of the court, right, Kim, this week?
Yeah, we've had three motions for the same case this week because the father.
Not that we filed.
No, we didn't file it, but the father filed. And the court has right now just denied everything on the emergency motions. And we're not quite sure what that's going to do long-term to anybody's case. We don't know if, for instance, there'll be a petition for rule that's filed later to hold somebody in contempt. But I'm kind of thinking really a contempt has to be able to show that there's kind of this malicious intent not to comply with the court order. But if it were me, and like I said before, if that other parent is traveling back and forth, that parent travels for business, is still traveling, you have to do what's in your child's best interest, which might be to deny the request to parent for the other parent to see the child physically. And if they want to file an emergency on it, so far we've seen, at least I've seen 5 now in the last week, all have been denied by the courts.
And I just want to add that what the courts are looking for, in my opinion, and Kim and Jessica and I, we've talked about this, is, okay, I'm not getting my parenting time, but is the child in danger? Is there something emergent? And if the child's not in danger and it's just a denial of parenting time, we're seeing they're not finding that to be an emergency. The courts, in our opinion, they're not going to say, I demand that you allow visitation. And if something was to happen, then it's going to fall back on them. So I think emergency situations, or to file an emergency, you have to show that the child is in danger somehow, whether it be health related, travel related, some condition related, but simply denying visitation in our experience is not an emergency.
Yeah, and Laura's still got a follow up here. What was the motion that was denied? Like what was filed and what was denied? Well, we filed one, it was denied because parent wouldn't bring the child back. And so that was just not adhering to the parenting order, not bringing the child back to the custodial parent. That was denied. And then in Cook County, the petition that was filed against was essentially an emergency, all of them were emergencies, emergency motion to require that the parenting time take place. So like a motion to compel or an emergency petition for rule, emergency order protection, it doesn't matter what they called it, essentially it was the same thing. Parenting time that had been ordered was not being followed. And like Jan said, unless you can demonstrate in your petition that someone is actually injured, is at great danger, we haven't seen that the court's taken any action on those petitions so far.
And keep in mind the danger and the emergent, it has to do with the child. It's an emergency motion is going to be based on the child's condition. So, and the other thing that's been recently put in place by Judge Dickler is if it's found not to be an emergency, she will send you to a free maximum 2-hour session with a video mediator so that they can try to keep these situations from becoming even more explosive. So that's a very, very good thing. It's something that's available, and if parents can't work it out, take advantage.
Okay, sounds good. I think we're good on these questions. So we're going to go back to some of the questions that were pre-sent. So next question is for Jessica. How to co-parent when the other parent keeps breaking orders?
Well, it really depends on what orders they're breaking, because if they're breaking orders, are they co-parenting at all? If it has to do with making decisions together, if that's not happening, it makes it really difficult to co-parent. But if it's something where they're breaking like a parenting time order, but they're still willing to discuss things with you and make decisions with you, and they're still trying to facilitate a relationship with you, co-parenting can still exist. It's kind of, they're not one and the same necessarily. But there may be, if this is a deeper underlying issue where there's no facilitation of a relationship between the children and the other parent, there's disparagement and just constant problems, you may need to consider other avenues. Is this a situation that's ripe for a mediation? Is that going to resolve it? Do you need a parenting coordinator to help you make these decisions? There's a lot of options for you based on the specifics of the situation. I've even seen parents do co-parenting therapy or family therapy to try and communicate better. So it's not something that should be ignored, but you may need help co-parenting with someone who can't follow an order. And that's a time to reach out to your attorney or to us and talk about your situation and see if any of these would be a good fit for you.
Okay, good. Thank you, Jessica.
Sure.
Good question. All right, so next question. That's for Jan, sorry. So if a divorce is in process, what's the impact of layoff before divorce agreements are finalized? I know there are a lot of divorces who are already in process. So.
Yeah, and I think if you're in process and things come up, because all of us, Kim and Jessica and I, we all have divorces that are in process, and now people are in flux and things change. Well, that's not a bad time for this to happen right now, because we can make final determinations or we can make modifications in our negotiations because there hasn't been a final order yet. So this is something, of course, you talk with your attorney about. If there's temporary orders in place, you could do the motions. So if you're still in the process, that's a time to take it into consideration.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Jan. All right, so next question is for Jessica. What to do when your ex stops or cuts paying for child's health premiums or child support, either one. And what can you do? Can you reduce the alimony to make up for it?
So I'm just going to clarify what I think this question says before I answer it, because I think it's a little bit confusing to some. I think the question is, if you have a spouse and you are paying them maintenance or spousal support, but they are responsible for paying you child support and the children's health insurance premiums, are you allowed to offset what they owe you from the maintenance you're paying them? And what I would say, and what I've told clients in this situation, is that this is not something to do it now and ask for permission later. I think that you should always get a motion on file prior to reducing payments unilaterally, just to make sure that you're asking for permission to do it. Because it doesn't make sense. Someone owes you money, but you're going to keep paying them. Internally, naturally, that just doesn't make sense. But you have a court order and you have to follow it until it's modified. You have to put a request in, you've got to file a motion, and hopefully it'll all get straightened out. And as I said before, you've got that retroactivity date, so you don't want to wait on this. You want your relief to be retroactive if you're modifying something back to the date that you file. So the sooner you ask, the more likely you can get the relief going backwards. So if you're making those overpayments, maybe it would be reimbursed back. But certainly you also don't want your child to go without health care. So I'd look into that right away as well, and what your options are to get them insured ASAP, even while you're filing a motion to sort this out.
Okay, sounds good. Any comments on that, Jan or Kim?
No, I think Jessica did a great job. Thanks, Jessica.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, great. Next question is for Kim. So I lost my job and I have no money for support, or lost money where I have less money for support. What are my options?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds, not to be repetitive, but it's repetitive. Don't know what more you could say about it than, if you've got a substantial change in circumstance, get a motion filed. I mean, there's not much else you can do, in my opinion.
Okay, sounds good.
I would add to that too, that even if you can't pay the full amount, while the motion's pending and you're waiting for a result, pay as much as you can. Your kids still need food. They still need what they need. And you're showing a good faith effort, at least from a realistic perspective, to try and support them to the best of your ability. Even if you can't pay the full amount, don't pay nothing. That looks really bad.
Okay, sounds good. Great advice. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so next question is for Jessica. So actually, before we get to these three questions, like the ending questions, I think we'll open it up to see if there are more. Let's just have everyone be not muted Noel, so people can ask questions naturally if they like. How's that? Then we'll
Okay.
come back and we'll close it with the last 3 questions.
Okay, I'm unmuting everyone right now.
Okay, well, it's so much better with, maybe we can hear you guys. So yeah, who would like to go? A question that you may have?
I have a question. Does anybody have any guess? I mean, is it all based on the governor's disaster proclamation of when they're going to open the court systems back up? Because even if you wanted to file a non-emergency order, how are you going to, prove it? How are you going to set a court date if we have no idea when they're going to open?
Well, you know what
Go ahead, Jan.
they put in place a pretty nice procedure where you file a motion, a non-emergency motion, and you serve it on the other side, and there's automatic there's an automatic briefing schedule. They get 21 days to respond, you get 7 days to reply, then you send that whole package to the judge. And if the courts aren't open yet, the judge can rule on it. The judge can order a phone conference, a video conference. So things are moving. Things are in place to keep things moving.
And it varies by county as far as the court closure date. Right now, Daly Center is technically running under a limited capacity through May 18th. And I'm unsure of the dates of the other local counties at this point.
Okay. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Okay, sounds we're good. So we have some departing questions to the presenters. So we'll start with Jessica first. Okay, just feel like summing it up for us, what are the impacts of these difficult times on parenting orders, and what conditions that maybe we didn't discuss so far that may result in a change in the order?
Well, there's really two things I want to make sure that I point out to everyone. First and foremost, this entire situation is an extenuating circumstance. So I know that we often press upon our clients that the court is always looking at what's the status quo been in terms of modifying parenting time or changing an order or establishing an order for parenting time. We don't know for sure, but I would suggest and think that the court is not going to hold anybody to the precedence that's been set during a international pandemic for the purpose of modifying a parenting time order. So that being said, if you feel like it is just not safe for you to exercise your time, or if your spouse feels that way, I don't think that you're going to be able to use that as a basis to go in and permanently modify your schedule. And that's just my thoughts on it. That's the first thing. The second thing that I want to point out is that this is really a test for everybody who is co-parenting with another person to see who plays nicely on the playground. And if you do something that is alienating, if you are purposefully withholding time from another parent without a good reason, without some sort of extenuating circumstance, if you are making things difficult, and you always make things difficult, it's going to come back to bite you. This is really just a test to see who can abide by court orders, who can work together. And as Jan pointed out before, your kids are watching you. They're always watching you. They are feeding off of you. They are feeding off of everything that you do. So keeping, calm and to the best of your ability, and just trying to make sure that everything stays as even-keeled as possible is going to really help you, help your family. And I don't think that you should be worried about modifying the status quo if it means taking health and safety precautions for your kids.
Okay. Sounds great. Thank you, Jessica. That was nice. All right, so next question is for Jan. So any departing thoughts about support of the stimulus package and how best to deal with that?
Yeah, I want to clarify one thing that may have been misunderstood, or maybe I said it wrong, but when you get this check, this stimulus check, they're considering it a rebate. It's going to be in the rebate category. So it's not going to be considered income on your 2020 tax return. So when you put in your income, you're not going to have to add your stimulus check because they're calling it a rebate. And then as far as with one party getting it from the other party or sharing it, I'm assuming that each party is going to get their own check, or maybe you have a high wage earner on one side who won't get a check and a lower wage earner on the other side who will get a check. I can't see a scenario where a court would require a low wage earner to provide a portion of that. So I think with the way this is structured, we won't have too many problems with it, but although it is income to help you carry on, it's not going to be includable in your gross income.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Jan. Then the last question is for Kim. Anything else we need to know about the courts and handling pressing matters during this tough time?
Right, I mean, the court's handling things slower, but still able to go forward with your case. So in my opinion, now's a real good time to knock out some of that discovery that you haven't wanted to get to. We've all got a lot of extra time on our hands right now. So think about what you need to do to move your case along at the way it was going before. That's how we're handling our cases. We're making sure that our discovery is up to date, the petitions that need to be filed are filed. And not everything has to be an emergency, you know, so if everyone can abide by their court orders and move forward, work with the other parent, that's going to work the best for your case.
Yeah, and we're keeping really, really busy because there's a lot of work to be done. We're still filing motions, we're still settling cases, we're still talking to potential clients, we're still talking to our clients on a daily basis to get everybody through this. So there's a lot of work that we're still doing, and we look forward to getting back into the office. Yay!
Some of us.
Great.
Some of us.
All right, so there is one question I'd like to ask from the chat. So there is a health circumstance in this situation. And the question is, I want to propose not traveling back and forth weekly and know that other parents wants to see them more. I want to propose exchange the children every 3 weeks to limit transmission, and hope that when the children are not on my space, that the other co-parent is not exposing themselves. Is this okay? So it's a specific question. And then, is this okay? And then how do you propose we go about the process if the other co-parents wants weekly and the other co-parents wants more streamlined time for less transmission?
Well, I think that goes back to our original comments, is you got to talk with the other parent about that. But it does make sense, and I've seen a lot of parents work through that, is they have less transfers, so they have longer periods of time, or the party who's working in the medical field maybe doesn't have as much or very limited time. So whatever works between the two of you. If not, get a mediator, talk to a mediator, have somebody help you talk through it. But of
Does
course,
anyone know a good mediator?
I'm sorry?
I said, does anyone know a good mediator?
Oh, they're all over the place now.
I know one.
There's a lot of them. There's a lot of good mediators. There's a lot of
Brian
good
is joining us. There's Brian right there.
All right,
That's a very good solution. Very, very good solution.
Brian does great work.
all right, sounds good. So Brian, there we go. Do you want to say something? Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I'm listening in, and I'm dealing with my cases as a mediator and a parenting coordinator, talking with parents about, stay-at-home orders. And I have a client that one lives in Naperville and one lives in Iowa, and the dad's trying to make an argument that Iowa has less cases than Illinois, so he should get to keep the kids. But then he lives with his elderly parents who are more susceptible. So, as a mediator, I'm trying to negotiate compliance with their parenting agreement, but trying to keep in common sense with the kids shouldn't be traveling between Illinois and Iowa. So it's difficult, normal good co-parents, this shouldn't be an issue. But when you have your super high conflict that treat the kids as pawns and they demand their time with their kids, it's becoming an issue. And I'm doing a lot of Zoom calls with parents who say, well, you're denying my time. Well, you're trying to protect your child. That takes precedence over your parenting time right now. And people, for some reason, aren't understanding that.
It's almost as if these parents don't realize that parenting time is more than just hanging out now. You're their teacher. So enjoy that if you're going to keep them longer.
Yeah.
You're teaching them, you're doing your job, you're cleaning your house, you're doing all of these things. And really, there's a big responsibility with having parenting time when you're supposed to be doing e-learning too. And I would think that a lot of parents might embrace the idea of putting some of that on another parent for a couple of days or for a week. But, you know,
You would
these high
think.
conflict cases, you know, maybe they always aspired to be a teacher. I don't know. So.
All right. So maybe we'll have a session about how are you enjoying spending so much time with your children.
Yeah, let's do this again. This was great.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. I see no more questions here in the dialogue box. Thank you for taking the time and joining us today, Jan, Kim, and Jessica.
Thank you guys.
guys are awesome.
Thank you guys
See you
for
later.
joining in.
Yeah,
I
bye.
can't wait
Take care.
Can't wait to see you in person.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.